Originally, I was planning on doing this video as more of like a vlog type style. However, I severely overestimated my ability to both recover from this surgery and film a vlog at the same time. And that's mainly due to the fact that I went into the surgery not really knowing what to expect. I drew a lot of conclusions and just assumed that this recovery was going to be exactly like my first surgery. And as I've learned, these surgeries were completely different. This was far more extensive. They did a lot more in my insides, cut a lot more out. And so recovery has been a lot different than I was anticipating. It's been a lot harder. So it's taken me a little longer than I wanted to sit down and do this video, but I'm here now. I'm 1 week out of surgery, and I'm finally gonna do the video. I want this video to be sort of in depth because, like I said, I didn't know what to expect going into this surgery. And I know I don't have the largest following, but I really want to make this video for the next woman with endometriosis who stumbles onto my channel, who's trying to prepare for surgery but doesn't know what to expect and doesn't know what that looks like. So I realized that the normal person isn't going to watch this all the way through, and I'm going to try to break it up in the description box below if you just wants to hear about one aspect of surgery or whatever. But I'm going to go through basically my whole entire surgery day, what that looks like, how recovery has been kind of a shock to me, what they found, all of that. So yeah, we're just gonna jump right into it. I will say that because I went into this not knowing what to expect, I walked into the hospital that morning so much more anxious than my first surgery, which doesn't really make sense because by all means the first surgery should have been more anxiety inducing just because I was going to be finding out if I had endo or not, whereas I already know I had endo walking into this. So it should have been, I think, easier on my mind, but it was really, really scary. So my surgery was at 7:45 in the morning. You have to show up at the hospital 2 hours prior to that. So I woke up at like 3:30ish and we were at the hospital by 5:30. I had my pre-op appointment the day before my surgery. So pre-op is basically just them taking your vitals, walking you through the surgery so that way you kind of know what to expect, although I didn't really know what to expect walking into it. And during pre-op, they took my blood pressure and it was like 189/160, which is considered to be hypertensive crisis, which basically just increases my chances of having a stroke on the table, which obviously isn't good. So they prescribed me Xanax to kind of take the day before surgery and going into my surgery that morning to hopefully bring my blood pressure down, because they would not have operated on me had I walked into surgery with my blood pressure like that. So I was trying to stay calm going into it because I knew my blood pressure was an issue. However, that's really hard to do when you don't know what to expect and you don't know what they're gonna find in surgery. So I was trying to keep it together a little bit. I ended up going in the morning of my surgery. My blood pressure had lowered, thank the Lord. They gave me anti-nausea and anti-anxiety meds before surgery to kind of make sure that I was good to go once I got in the OR. And that time, my family members came back one by one and just kind of hung out with me and kept me distracted so I wouldn't think about things. And then they brought me back to the OR. I don't want to say that things started to fall apart, but they kind of, in a way, did. During my first surgery, the first surgery I had ever had, when they brought me into the OR, they immediately put me under anesthesia, and that was it. That's all I remember. And it was great. Whereas this surgery, they brought me back into the OR and I was laying on the table. And I'm just gonna say that I have really bad anxiety when it comes to people touching me. It makes doctor's appointments really hard, but also surgery really hard. It just gives me anxiety to have people put their hands on me. So they brought me back to the OR. I was on the table and I had about 6 different people all touching me, doing something to my body while I was still awake. And then the anesthesiologist came over and put an oxygen mask on me, and I also have severe claustrophobia, so just having the mask on my face, it just like freaked me out. It sent me into like a state of panic, and I started to cry, which is surprising, I know. Kate crying and losing it. My doctor, who has won award after award for being the most compassionate doctor and patient's choice, was very compassionate. He was just like wiping my tears, and he held my hand and he prayed with me before surgery, which I really, really appreciated, and was just like trying so hard to be comforting, which I really appreciate. But it just took them a good while, it seemed, after I got into the OR before they put me under, and I didn't respond well with it. They eventually put me under anesthesia, and it both felt like the quickest nap in the world, but also the heaviest nap, the most restful. It was great. However, waking up, I think my headspace was still where it was before anesthesia, which was anxiety and panic from everyone touching me. So I woke up obviously disoriented, not really knowing what was happening, what was going on, what they found. I didn't really know anything. So I ended up having a pretty severe anxiety attack, and the issue was I felt like I couldn't breathe. So I woke up, I was really panicky, I started to freak out, the anxiety set in even more, I felt like I couldn't breathe, I started crying, hyperventilating. When you feel like you can't breathe, you start to freak out, and then you end up in freaking out, not being able to breathe as well. So it was just like a vicious cycle. Someone asked me going into this experience to mention my nurse's bedside manners, and other than this experience, my nurses were absolutely incredible, and I'll get to that a little bit more, but I was really frustrated when it was happening because I was obviously freaking out. It was very scary, and my nurses seemed to really not care, which fed more into the panic and anxiety. So I was telling them that I couldn't breathe, and they were like, oh no, like, you're breathing just fine, you're fine. And it just felt very minimizing, and like I just felt brushed off, which is scary when you feel like you're dying. So I eventually asked for my mom. My mom came back, and because my mom knows me and she's incredible, she was eventually able to bring me out of the panic attack, but it lasted 45 minutes, which is an alarming amount of time to have a panic attack. And normally when I have a panic attack, the only thing that brings me out of it is kind of like rationalizing with myself and telling myself like, okay, this is your fear, but that's not rational, this is what is actually happening, and I can normally bring myself out of it fairly quickly. However, being under anesthesia, I didn't have the mental capacity to do that because I was drugged. It just ended up being a really horrible anesthesia experience, which is really unfortunate because after my first surgery, I felt great waking up from anesthesia, and I thought that that was going to be my experience this time, and it was not. So after 45 minutes of hyperventilating and sobbing, I eventually calmed down and was brought back to my hospital room where all my family was able to come back and hang out with me. And this is where the nurses were absolutely fantastic. They weren't the same nurses as the ones, I think, who didn't help me throughout my panic attack. Different set of nurses. They were just very on top of it. They had me on a pain pump, so every single time I felt something unpleasant, I could just hit the pump, get those painkillers. It was great, and they were just checking in on me a lot and made me actually feel like I was sick and needed to be taken care of, which is not a normal feeling you feel with endometriosis and the medical field. You're constantly feeling like your doctors think you're crazy and you're making it up, and it's kind of up to you to figure out. So to have nurses come in and ask if I was okay, or if they could do anything, or if they could bring me anything, was like really validating to me, which was great. So during surgery, he opened me up, and during my first surgery, my endometriosis was on both my pouch of Douglas and my uterus. So he went in this time and located all of the old endo and excised all of that. But my endo had pretty much doubled since my last surgery 10 months ago. So it had spread even more on my uterus, which is really scary to think about. And it had also spread to my bladder as well. So he took out all of that as well. He took out my appendix because he said it was not looking good. He also performed a nerve block, so that way the first couple days after surgery I wouldn't be able to feel anything in my abdomen, which was supposed to be a really kind act, and I do appreciate it, but it did cause issues later on trying to get discharged from the hospital, which I'll get into later. So that was basically surgery. I stayed in the hospital for about a day and a half. They had to keep me there for a minimum of 23 hours, and like I said, I ended up having a little bit of an issue, so I stayed there a little bit longer. But in that time, they are, like I said, very on top of pain management, but also they really want you to get up and walk and move around because it's supposed to help speed up the healing process, which I'm just gonna say the last thing I wanted to do waking up from surgery was get up and walk a lap around the hospital, but it was kind of necessary, so I did it multiple times and it was great. So the issue with the nerve block was it was put in to help minimize any feeling in my abdomen to hopefully help reduce pain, which obviously I was still in pain because I had incisions in my abdomen, and you can feel that every single time you move. Because it was in my abdomen, I couldn't really feel much of anything that was happening down there, if you're picking up what I'm putting down. So I had a catheter put in during surgery, which is very unpleasant. Nobody likes catheters. They eventually took it out after surgery. The issue is because I had the nerve block, I couldn't really feel when my bladder was full or anything like that. So I would go and I would pee, and then they would do an ultrasound immediately after, and my bladder was still like completely full, even though I couldn't feel it. So they kept me in the hospital for a while to see if my bladder and organs were just going to start kind of like waking up from anesthesia and the nerve block a little bit, and I was hopefully going to be able to pee with no issues. I know you guys are just loving hearing about my bladder yet again. Basically, if I couldn't pee the right amount, I was gonna have to go home for the weekend with a catheter in, which was not happening. I was not about to let that happen. So they gave me a couple of hours to basically just drink a lot of water and pee, and then every single time after I peed, they would come in, do an ultrasound, and see how much was still in my bladder. I never fully emptied my bladder while I was at the hospital, but it got to a point to where it was low enough to where they were like, yeah, your bladder's probably not going to explode if we send you home without a catheter. So luckily I was able to go home. And over the next few days, as I was waking up from anesthesia more and the nerve block was wearing off, I was able to pee with no issues. So thank the good Lord, I didn't have to have a catheter going home. That would have been horrible. It would have, I think, traumatized me. As far as recovery goes, like I said, it's been a lot different than my first surgery. During my first surgery, the only pain that I had coming out of surgery was the fact that there was incisions in my stomach, and you feel that anytime you move or do anything. And then I had really bad shoulder pain. For those of you who don't have endo or have endo but have never had surgery before, basically they pump your abdomen up with gas, so that way they can look through your organs or whatever with no issues. Once you wake up from surgery, all that gas is trapped inside. There's no way for it to escape because it's just kind of like running free in your body. So it forms these little gas bubbles that rise to your shoulders and eventually pop, but it's really, really uncomfortable. That was the worst aspect of recovery in my first surgery, was the shoulder pain. This surgery, the recovery was, like I said, a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. For the first couple days afterwards, I just laying there was really, really painful. Like I could feel inside of me where they cut out the endo. Like I could physically feel where my endo was and where they cut. And because of location of it being on my bladder, my pouch of Douglas, and my uterus, basically everything hurt. I'm not gonna list it off because that might be TMI, but everything hurt. Every time I moved, everything hurt, and it was really bad. Having 3 incisions on your abdomen and shoulder pain on top of that, and not being able to pee, it was quite something. So the nerve block eventually wore off, and I had a very high dosage of Percocet prescribed to me, which my body does not do very well with Percocet, as I've noticed somewhat recently, but it was made very clear after the surgery because I was eating with the Percocet like you should, and I don't know if it was the prescription being such a high dosage, but my body was just not handling it very well, and I ended up the day after surgery when I went home getting really, really sick and like throwing up because my stomach just couldn't handle the Percocet, which throwing up with stitches in your stomach is a horrible, horrible feeling that I don't wish on anybody. Yeah, so the first couple days I tried to power through the Percocet. Eventually it was causing a lot of issues. I was very nauseous all the time. So I stopped the Percocet and was just taking lots of ibuprofen every 6 hours, 800 milligrams on the dot, which obviously ibuprofen can only do so much. It was very painful. So that has basically been recovery. I am 8 days out of surgery as of right now. And obviously I felt good enough to sit down and film this video, but I'm very uncomfortable pretty much at all times still. They said it would take up to 2 weeks to recover, and we're just rolling with it. I'm watching a lot of Criminal Minds on Netflix. I'm playing a lot of Pokemon, and I'm just laying in bed a lot, which is fine. Doing this video has completely wore me out, so I'm probably gonna take a nap after this, but I just wanted to come on and make sure that when I did, I was able to voice everything from start to finish, how that whole entire experience went for me. I'll try to keep you guys updated, but I just wanted to take a moment to thank everyone who messaged me, asked if they could do anything, or that I was in their thoughts and prayers. It really means a lot to know that people care. So thank you for all of the love. Hopefully I was able to answer your questions and anything you're wanting to know about that whole entire experience. Thank you guys for watching this video. Thank you guys for being patient with me because I was not on top of my upload day this week. I really thought going into the surgery that I was going to be fine coming out of it and that I wasn't going to have to focus on recovery, but it has been a little hard on my body. So just know that there are more videos coming that I'm very excited to film, and hopefully I will be more on top of it in the future. But subscribe to my channel so that way you know when those are coming out, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.